Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, members of the commission.
Yeah, it wasn't mine.
This is the October 3rd special meeting of the Stonington Planning and Zoning Commission. Let the record reflect that the meeting was called to order at 7 p.m. With respect to appointment of alternates, it seems like we've been here before, Bennett, and then all of a sudden you were seated and then not seated, but with respect to this evening, you'll be seated. And that may change as we move through various items based on who is present for various public hearings. So as we address certain items, you know, it may change who votes and who doesn't vote. So as we move through old business, I may update that. Minutes from meeting number 1736, September 19, 2023. What's the commission's pleasure?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve the minutes for meeting number 1736 from September 19, 2023 as written and submitted.
Thank you, Ryan. We have a motion to approve. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Correspondence? We have a letter from Mason's Island property owners. Clifton, any comment on that?
No comment. That was just a response letter in response to the previous discussion
Correct.
that we've had. So nothing else to do on the town's end.
Is that still in the purview of the zoning enforcement officer
It is.
who's following up?
It is, yes.
Thank you. Staff reports. Clifton? Nothing? Okay. Ben, I know that you've been meeting with the POCD group and have a brief report for us on that?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I do represent the Planning and Zoning Commission for the POCD Implementation Committee, which is the main body for the POCD to try to get things done. And the POCD is a very large, complicated document that was written, a state mandate to have it written and then revised every 10 years. So the Implementation Committee is looking at how to revise the 2015 edition for 2025, and thanks to Clifton, who is absolutely jump-starting the process, sort of went idle with Keith leaving, and then letting Clifton get his feet on the ground. So we've had one meeting September 25th and two more scheduled for October to review where we went right and where we went wrong since 2015, and trying to streamline that document to make that more user-friendly, and perhaps, hopefully, dovetailing somewhat into the regulation rewrite that we're working on. I think a lot of the community has finally realized that a lot of the POCD hinges on the zoning regulations. There'll be two more meetings, as I said, in October, and that will create more spin towards how to get the public input through surveys and workshops.
I'm excited to see how that document unfolds. I know Clifton has some more innovative ideas about what is in a POCD, and I think it's going to be a much more usable document and a living document as a result of it. So we have a tendency to use acronyms, but why don't you explain for everybody what POCD is?
It's the Plan of Conservation and Development, which unto itself is a conflicting title, to my opinion. So it's a challenging task to try to get this right.
It is. It is. Well, thank you for your service on that important committee, Ben.
You're welcome.
Anything else? Thank you. Anything under zoning enforcement and violations, Clifton?
At the end of your packet was the zoning enforcement officer's report between June and August. So that's been provided.
Thank you. Brings us to the first item for administrative review, Brookside Associates Limited Partnership.
The first item up on the application is 2324-2ZON, Brookside Associates Limited Partnership zoning permit application for minor driveway modification at the Glen and 100 Unit Affordable Housing Project as per Connecticut OSTA requirements. Property is located at 111 South Broad Street, map block lot 37-1-1B, zone GC 60. And I believe applicant's representative is here tonight.
Is there anyone here for the Brookside Associates? Just for those in the audience, OSTA is the old State Traffic Commission, and it's the new traffic authority for the state of Connecticut. Yes, sir.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
My name is James Filipina, and I'm an associate attorney at Tobin Carberry in New London.
Evening.
I'm here tonight on behalf of Attorney Bill Sweeney, who can't be with us. Our client, Brookside Associates, respectfully submits this administrative permit application for your consideration. The Commission previously approved Brookside's 100-unit affordable housing application in May 2022 under General Statute Section 8-30 subsection G. This project, however, was subject to a review by the Connecticut Department of Transportation's Office of State Traffic Administration, also known as OSTA, due to its shared access from South Broad Street with Brookside Village. As originally proposed, the project included an additional secondary full-access curb cut that permitted ingress and egress to and from the property onto South Broad Street. As part of OSTA's review of the state application, the agency requested that the full-access curb cut be modified to allow only a right-turning ingress for traffic traveling west on South Broad Street. Following OSTA's review, this modified curb cut was reviewed and approved by the Pawcatuck Fire Chief, the Stonington Chief of Police, and the Chairman of the Police Commission. We believe that this modification, which is being required by OSTA, is an overall safety improvement. This belief has been echoed by the Fire Chief, the Police Chief, and the Chairman in their review of the modification. OSTA, in Administrative Decision 905, approved the project with the modified curb cut that we have presented for your consent and approval. As the Commission is aware, OSTA maintains exclusive jurisdiction over traffic permitting at the site. Accordingly, the modification sought does not constitute a material or substantial alteration to the project site plan, and therefore, we respectfully request that the Commission accept and approve our application.
Any questions from the commission? Has the town engineer seen this application?
He has not. Sorry. He has not. He's been away on vacation.
Any questions of the attorney at all from anyone? No? Could you just briefly synopsize what the modifications were?
Yes, of course. So there was initially a curb cut that allowed traffic to turn in and out, either left or right, onto Route 1 from the property. Now OSTA is asking that the secondary curb cut, so access onto the property, only allow right-turning traffic onto the property. So if you're traveling west on Route 1, so from here towards the Stonington Police Department, that's the only way to turn onto the property through that curb cut is turning right.
Okay. Since the town engineer isn't here to look at this, I have just one question. Since their second means of access was changed slightly, can a fire truck still negotiate that right turn only from both directions?
Yes, that is my understanding. In the fire chief's review of this project, they approved it and they believe that this is an overall safety improvement from the original site plan.
Okay. I have no other questions.
So I just want to be clear, if you're traveling east, there's only one way to get into that property, and that's at the traffic light?
I believe it is
Or just
Brookside.
is west of the traffic light, yeah.
Yeah, Brookside Lane. So
Where the
right.
big sign is now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That is a central entryway for the entire property.
Yes.
Okay. Just making sure I got it. Thank you.
No, absolutely.
What's the commission's pleasure on Brookside Associates Limited Partnership Application 23-242 ZON?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve the application as submitted with the two recommended stipulations from the Commission. First recommended stipulation is prior to the issuance of a zoning permit, final plan shall be signed by the commission and recorded in the town's land evidence records. And number 2, all previous stipulations from PZ 2206 SUP and GPP Brookside Associates Limited Partnership shall be met in addition to this approval.
Ryan, could you also add to that that it's subject to the review and approval of the town engineer since he has not had a chance to look at it?
Yes, in addition, then a third stipulation that this would be reviewed by the town engineer and subject to his approval prior to proceeding.
Thank you, Ryan. Okay, so we have a motion to approve the application of Brookside Associates with 3 conditions. Is there any discussion on the motion? No questions? Okay.
I second the motion.
All right, no discussion on the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Tell Bill we all said hello.
Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to old business. The first item under old business is application PZ 2314 SUP Janet, represented by Attorney Casey. What's the commission's pleasure on this application?
Mr. Chairman, I think we've received the feedback from the town attorney and everybody's had a chance to look at that. So I think based on the feedback from the town attorney, I would make a motion to approve the application as submitted with the recommended stipulations. Currently there are 8 recommended stipulations. I can read those out if required.
Now, Clifton, I know when there were a number of waivers requested, I believe, as part of this application,
Correct.
if I'm not mistaken. Can we approve the waivers as a part of the basic motion? We can.
Yes, you can.
So are you including the waivers also,
I
Ryan?
am including the waivers as part of the motion to approve.
Okay. So we have a motion made by Ryan. Is there a second?
I second the motion.
Seconded by Gary. All in favor of I'm sorry, any discussion on it?
Mr. Chair, I was wondering about if we could discuss the hours of operation a little further.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, they're requesting 6 a.m. to midnight,
Correct.
which seems a little long to me. And
It's particularly late, I think, for a gas station and a convenience store.
yeah, I did a very prompt survey on the way in tonight.
Mhm.
And the gas station right next door is open to 11, and the one down towards the west of North Water Street and Route 1 is open till 8:30 this time of year, 9 o'clock in the summer. So midnight seems a big stretch for lights to be on and,
Particularly with the overnight deliveries of fuel that are anticipated.
good point,
You have a little bit larger window
good point.
within which to get in there and deliver the fuel overnight also. So, would you modify your motion to?
Sure. I can modify the motion to have, and this is stipulation number 8, which is the hours of operation for both the convenience store and gas pump shall be limited to between 6 a.m. and 11 p.m.
Is that okay with the second?
Yeah.
It is. Okay. So we have an additional stipulation added in addition to the previous stipulations mentioned by Ryan. Any further discussion? No other questions? No. Clifton, any comments at this point that, with regard to the motion or anything we might have overlooked?
No additional comments. No.
Okay. Before we go, Clifton, I think you did a particularly good job following up with the attorneys on the legal opinions and some of the other items to keep us moving on a timely basis on this. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Second that.
So we have a motion and a second, various stipulations. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The motion carries. Under old business, item B, Spruce Meadows. I understand that this item is not ready to proceed, Clifton?
Correct, I'll just read it into the record. This item is PZ 2323, bond release Spruce Meadows LLC, bond reduction release application for the work performed under PZ 1203, SUP and GPC, TFB3 LLC, applications for construction of 2 multi-unit residential structures and associated improvements. Property is located at 100 South Broad Street, map block lot 25-1-5, zones LS5 and RR80. This application is for the full release of a $6,000 erosion sedimentation control bond. No comment has been received by the town engineer, zoning enforcement officer, or fire district marshal at this time, so recommend tabling it until those comments are received.
Do we have a motion to that effect?
Mr. Chairman, make a motion to table this application pending the receipt of the opinions and feedback from the town officials.
Thank you, Ryan. Is there a second?
Second?
Second.
Second by Gary Belke. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Okay, that brings us to the public hearing agenda. Ryan, would you, so Bennett, you'll be seated for the public hearing tonight. Okay? Thank you. Would you read the legal advertisement, if you have it?
I unfortunately do not have it. I'm happy to do that.
Do you have a legal ad for the
I've got it here.
public hearing?
Pursuant to the general statutes of the state of Connecticut, revision of 1958 and all amendments thereto, and pursuant to the zoning regulations for the town of Stonington, Connecticut, the Planning and Zoning Commission hereby gives notice that it will hold a public hearing at the Stonington Board of Education District Office, 40 Field Street, Pawcatuck, Connecticut, on Tuesday, October 3rd at 7 p.m. on the following application. PZ 2321ZC and CAM Pawcatuck Riverview, LLC M. Kepple Esquire. Zoning map amendment to IHRD-5 and coastal area management review applications for the rehabilitation of an historic mill building for 58 residential units and 1 detached residential unit. Property located at 21 Pawcatuck Avenue, Pawcatuck Assessors Map 5, Block 5, Lot 2, Zone MC80. At such hearing, any party may appear in person or be represented by an agent or by an attorney. Any disabled person requiring auxiliary aids or services for effective communication or access at this hearing should contact the Department of Planning at 860-535-5095 10 days prior to the hearing date. Dated Stonington, Connecticut, this 20th day of September 2023.
Thank you, Ryan. Is there anyone here from Pawcatuck Review?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. For the record, my name's Mark Kepple. I'm an attorney with offices in Stonington located at 804 Stonington Road, and I represent Pawcatuck Riverview LLC and the applicant Clark Cove Mill LLC. And the application consists of a zone change request from what is now a MC80, which is a marine commercial requiring 2 acres to conduct the activity of marine commercial on the property. And we are requesting a zone change to the Industrial Heritage Reuse District. I would say at the outset that there's a bit of deja vu since about 10 weeks ago we appeared before you and presented our concept. And since that time we have gone through a review with the state and regional and town departments to view the merits of the application. What I propose to do this evening is to explain a little bit of the history of the mill, not as much as the local historian, which I'm sure will contribute to that, but to explain the state of the building, the requirements for its restoration, and what the consequences of the work will be for now and for the future of the town.
Thank you, Mark.
So basically, we have Thread Mill 2, which was an addition to Thread Mill 1, sometime around the late 1800s. And at the time, the two were very similar, almost like twin sisters. Since that time, the building of Thread Mill 2 has undergone serious abuse and disintegration, essentially, so that now, at this point, the building is not weather tight, and the building presents, a substantial liability to the town in its current condition, and it also presents the prospect for a conversion into residences, which will afford people in Stonington more housing. It will return this unproductive, dilapidated building into, a significant contribution to return it onto the tax rolls. And it provides an area where Mechanic Street intersects with River Road that will essentially, if we're successful, go through a bit of a renaissance. It will elevate the use and occupancy of that area. It will provide, over 50 families with the opportunity to live in close proximity to the downtown, to be able to use the transportation based in Westerly, and to provide a portion of that to be affordable housing, which one of your commission members raised that issue at the workshop. What I'd like to do is introduce the principal and the professionals that have come this evening, and then follow the course of the planner's review, and then of course welcome any questions and concerns that the commission and or the public has about the project. So this evening with me is Jonathan Cousins, who's the chairman and CEO of Lee's Property, his associate Andrew Thorson, who's the director of development for that company. We also have an architect, John Seeger, who presented to you before, of Seeger and Associates. And we also have Eric DiNardo, who is our project engineer from the Verdantis Engineering Company. And both Mr. DiNardo and Mr. Seeger have extensive experience in the conversion of old mills into restoration and conversion into residence. Mr. Cousins himself is on his third mill restoration. He has completed a project in Haverhill, Massachusetts, and he is in the midst of completing a project in Attleboro, Massachusetts. So he brings a special expertise, and as they would say, this is not his first rodeo for this type of application.
We look forward to hearing from him.
Excuse me?
We look forward to hearing from him.
Well, I'm sure he'll get that opportunity as soon as I sit down. In the meantime, I just wanted to point out that in reviewing the town planner's report, he recognizes the commission's criteria for reviewing the merit of the property, and in doing so, he lays out for the commission the requirement that this plan comply with, the POCD, which your colleague explained a little bit in depth about your attempts to revise that in conjunction with reviewing the comprehensive zoning regulations that you have. And he was kind enough to do my work for me by explaining what the policy of the POCD is, and I just wanted to go through a couple of those bullet points to show you how we believe we're in compliance and consistent with that. And so one of the policies that they're trying to accomplish with the POC is to promote an adaptive reuse of the town's mill buildings and other historic commercial buildings through this type of regulatory incentive. And I believe we meet that criteria. The second is that to pursue grants for a facade improvement and prioritize the mill redevelopment in Pawcatuck. with particular attention to pursuing facade improvement. This project will be the subject of applications for historical credits. So the facade of the building and, you know, the outside and the architectural restoration will be subject not only to the town's architectural design review board, which we have gone through and spoken with and gotten their feedback, which is in this report, but it will also be subject to the State Historical Commission and the national parks. So that kind of criteria will ensure that the preservation meets the standards of both the state and federal government to warrant historical tax credits. In addition, the POCD encourages the reuse of buildings for housing where appropriate. And we are not only encouraging, but creating the reuse of this building for housing. And the appropriateness of this is its location. It is within not an ambitious, but a relatively easy walk into the downtown area. So it doesn't place much of a burden on traffic and the like. I would then drop down to the planner's comments about the applicant's requirement for compliance with zoning regulations. Specifically, he cites section 7.19. And so, in addition to our belief that we are in compliance with the POCD, which is one of the criteria for 7.19, 7.19.2.2, encourages, if not requires, the preservation to the maximum feasibility extent of buildings and building elements possessing historic or architectural significance. New buildings and additions shall be architecturally compatible with the historic structure. Those criteria we believe that we meet as well. We have a proposed restoration which will be subject to the historical guidelines that I just enumerated, and we also have a consideration for a new building, the limitations of which would be subject to, architectural compatibility with what we refer to as Thread Mill 2. So we feel that in that specific reference to our requirement for zoning compliance, we meet that as well. It certainly addresses the zoning need, the housing needs of the town, and it also, we would say, is compatible with the neighborhood uses when in fact we are physically attached to Thread Mill 1, which historically was the first mill constructed, and Thread Mill 2 was an addition. And at the time, I'm sure they made a lovely compliment to one another. At this point in time, we find ourselves as the ugly sister. And so, and to mirror a common theme of before and after, we would say that Thread Mill 2 represents before, and Thread Mill 1 represents after. That is, after we complete our project, we would hope that the two buildings would mirror each other, and that the ugly sister would go on to be the prettier of the two sisters. In addition to that, we wanted to comment on, again, following the planner's report, that we had appeared before the Architectural Review Board and the Police Commission and these other agencies and never encountered any opposition. There are certain things that they would like to see, particularly sidewalks, and we want to address that issue later on, but we're not asking at this point for any waivers. We've provided what has been required, and then there is a whole series of requirements that aren't applicable. So the zone change that we're requesting is really the product of a prior planner, that is Jason Vincent, who introduced into the zoning regulations a vehicle by which these mills could be restored and converted to residencies. And he set out two very clear and distinct paths that an applicant could take to achieve this. One was a zoning map, and the other was a text amendment. And specifically regarding the zoning map, at the time Mr. Vincent felt it was important when undertaking such a project to afford the developer the opportunity to present a proposal, which in effect was a concept of how the property could be used, and be able to present that to commission to get not only some feedback from, but in a sense, approval of that concept. And the underlying rationale for that was twofold. One, he thought it was important that the developer be given an opportunity to, if you will, dip their toe in the water, see what the climate was with the Planning and Zoning Commission, and if this concept or this proposal, carried any weight, carried any merit with the Planning and Zoning Commission. And the second part of that criteria was that afforded the developer an insight into whether the proposal was worth proceeding with. If you went and did the map amendment and presented your idea and there was a backlash, you would know before investing hundreds of thousands of dollars the viability and feasibility of the plan that you wished to take and had proposed to the Planning and Zoning Commission. The other thing that's pointed out in the planner's comments, which I think is well said, is that the benefit, he points out that we combine two steps, that is the establishment of the district and the development of a master plan. And he states in his report that the benefit of doing so accelerates the development of a site plan and thereby construction pending approval. And that particular observation is really critical in this project because of a number of factors. First of all, because of the nature and use of the structure historically, it is now considered a brownfield. There are chemicals and pollutants that are on the property that require a very vigorous effort by the municipality that it's located in, by the state that it's located in, and by the federal government overseeing, the remediation of the site. So when I appeared before you last time, I said that my client had entered into a partnership with the town of Stonington to accomplish this because Mr. Cousins couldn't go on his own to the DEEP and the federal government. It has to come from the town. So we have worked with the town and filed an application for the first step of this environmental remediation. And that step is for an environmental assessment. And that assessment grant has been awarded. Given the way state government operates, we're waiting for the shoe to drop and get the contract signed and go forward. But it's my understanding that is not just an important first step, but that it shows a commitment on the part of the town and the state to continue to explore and facilitate the remediation of the property. That remediation process will probably take at least 3 years. The second part is that the building itself is in such a state that we will not be able to make the building weather tight, that is to keep the elements out, until late summer of 2024. We have now been working to evaluate the building, and they have begun replacing beams in the mill itself to prepare for further construction. And they have replaced over 100 beams in the building in the course of the last few months. But whether the winter is coming, and so it's going to limit us going up and putting a new roof and all of that on, we're going to have to sort of survive through the winter, direct the elements out of the building, and then in the spring and the summer go back in earnest and button the building up. Additionally, we have had the projects reviewed by the Coastal Area Management out of the DEEP. And today we received a letter, which hopefully will be part of your package, stating categorically that this project is consistent with the Coastal Area Management policies. I spoke directly with them and explained the situation that we're in this process of presenting a map amendment to the Planning and Zoning Commission. Ordinarily, when the CAM authorities review a project, they have a site plan with definitive data and information to judge. What I did is I sent them a copy of the CAM review and approval from our neighbors, the HOCO developers, and explained to them that whatever review they make at this stage, they will in fact get a second bite at the apple, because as Mr. Vincent envisioned, once a map amendment is concluded and the developer gets a clear direction of the sentiment of the Planning and Zoning Commission, it then goes to the next phase, which is the actual site plan review, the application of all of the criteria for special permits and a host of different requirements of the regulations. And it will be our burden to come before you, have it reviewed by all of the agencies again, and find merit, and of course to place any conditions, to identify any issues of concern, so that the final product reflects your concerns, as well as endorsing the viability of the project. Lastly, I would just say, before I turn the meeting over to my colleagues, is that because of the condition of the building and the really Herculean task of remediating the site while restoring the structure, the thread mill too, it is critical to us to be able to seek and receive some kind of approval in order to be able to convince our investors that yes, we have, a response from the town. This is something that they hopefully endorse, and that will enable us to obtain investment and be able to move forward more quickly. Without your approval and without the investment, we're not really have the ability or be able to complete the project. So given the state of the building, given the task of remediating the site, and given the task of making the building productive and the like, we're seeking your approval so that we can then show investors that we do have the authority to go forward, that the project has viability, and that it can be funded by investors. So Mr. Cousins is here to answer any questions that you might have, as well as Mr. Thorson. But at this point, I would like to turn the presentation over to Mr. Seeger, the architect. He presented to you 10 weeks ago, but we feel it's important in the public setting for him to come up explain, what his architectural criteria are, and he will use this screen, and then he will be followed by Mr. DiNardo, who will address the engineering. Again, it's really important to understand that these gentlemen are presenting concepts, the finality of which and the further data of which will be presented at a site plan design review application, which we're hoping to submit in January of 2024. So without any further ado, please. I agree wholeheartedly with the chairman. All right, Mr. Seeger would be next.
Good evening, everyone. John Seeger, Seeger Architects. We're in Salem, Massachusetts, and as Mark mentioned, we specialize in historic restoration, not just mill buildings, but school buildings, churches, and the like, into multiple uses, but adaptive reuse into residential is a big part of our business. I'm just going to introduce the first slide and have Eric, the civil engineer, do his presentation with civil, and then I'll come back and finish up with architecture. I know when we met last time, we gave you somewhat an overview, but I'll be really short with the building history and where we're at. But basically, as Mark mentioned, this first photo, the aerial view, we have Thread Mill 1 that was completed around 2015. And then actually this is built Thread Mill 2 as an addition in 1899. This view is actually looking from Pawcatuck Avenue with a great lawn in the front, a single office building in the front in this picture, and then the 4-story mill building with a brick tower in the foreground. And basically the parking lot is here, the existing parking lot, which we plan on redoing for the mill building. But I guess if I just want to finish up with each of the aerial views, they're so great having drones. This is looking back at the property with existing wooden entrance here between the two buildings that we're looking at demolishing, and we're going to introduce our new entrance here. And then the site slopes back down towards the basement area, which we're looking at converting into a garage. And this 1-story structure is not part of our property. I think this photo over here, we added to show the commercial building that we're looking at renovating. It was originally part of the power station or the engine house. It's a great structure. It's 2 stories, and we'd like to be able to have that as part of the project to restore and find a commercial use for it. But this is actually River Road right here in the marina, just to get you kind of situated. Yeah, and this aerial view is just looking back at the whole site. We're looking north with River Road here and Pawcatuck Ave here. But I'm really going to present at the end, just wrap up the architectural part. If I can let Eric do more of the introduction for the civil engineering work, and then I'll jump back in.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Eric DiNardo. I'm a project engineer with Verdantis. We specialize in a wide array of different type of civil engineering aspects, but specifically myself, I've been involved with numerous brownfield sites for redevelopment as well as remediation purposes. So I'm not new to these sort of jobs. I've actually worked with Jonathan at the property over in Attleboro, Massachusetts. So I just want to speak a little bit to kind of the civil features associated with this site. This plan set that you're looking at now is relatively the same since the last time that we spoke. There's a few aspects to the conceptual design and coordination that kind of are going hand in hand with the environmental site assessment that Mr. Kepple mentioned earlier. So I am working with a colleague, Amy Pond, who's out of our Middletown, Connecticut office, who's a licensed environmental professional, who is working directly with Susan Cullen of the town of Stonington for the environmental assessment. Main point that I just want to bring up before jumping into civil is that the proposed site layout that we have on these plans are subject to change slightly depending on the environmental assessment, depending on certain sort of cuts that might have to happen or any sort of groundwater treatment that might have to happen, in addition to remediation within the actual structure itself due to contamination over time. So I did just want to make note of that. So this is a existing conditions survey that was done by Don Gissick and Associates, who's a licensed professional surveyor in Connecticut. Similarly to the last presentation, we are outside the 100-year flood zone for any of our work. So we did prepare a FEMA flood certificate, which can be provided upon request. But in that FEMA flood certificate, we're basically certifying that as of now, the property, there are no residential proposed units that are going to be within the FEMA flood zone, and we're actually evaluating the lower level right now to see if there's feasibility for parking. One of the big things to mention is that we're looking to provide 1.5 spaces per unit. It's a 51 unit development, so that's going to be approximately 77 spaces. So right now we're providing about 25 spaces part of phase 1. With approximately 40 spaces within phase 1 within the building. And then we're also providing additional handicap spaces as well to make up the requirement associated with Stonington. So this is just the overall existing conditions plan. A few pictures kind of highlighting the existing structure. I think the aerials did it justice. But moving on to this proposed site layout. So as I mentioned, one of the big things that did change recently following our last discussion was we actually provided the commercial space that Mr. Seeger mentioned over in this area over here. This also does include the proposed location for the transformer. We are working with a MEP to kind of coordinate on utilities making their way into the building, but as of now, we're looking at our utility rooms being on the lower level over here. So our utility corridor is going to access through River Road. We're currently working with local utility companies as well as providers to figure out loading and proper sizing of this. So that's going to be part of, as Mark mentioned, our site plan review process and application. This commercial space is also going to utilize the green space in this area to provide stormwater detention, which will further be designed once we get further information about the soil in the area. We're going to do advancement of soil borings. We're going to figure out the percolation rates and determine correct sizing based on the hydraulic soils that are located in this area. You'll see that this is the similar layout to the last presentation. One thing to note about this area is that this is basically providing a phase 1 and phase 2 of our application. So phase 1 is going to essentially focus in strictly on the parking within the actual area. So I'd actually like to go back to the aerial to kind of show this aerial down here in the bottom right kind of shows exactly what I'm mentioning. So our phase 1 parking is going to just utilize this existing area, and then you'll see this landscape portion over here, and then this impervious area as well is going to be designed and presented to the board at a later date. That's once Jonathan figures out exactly how he's going to proceed moving forward. But we're just we're demonstrating what that second phase would be in this plan, just so that the commission and the board are in full agreement of what we're actually planning on doing. We are currently evaluating all the grades at the site. It's a very steep site. I'm not sure if many have been out to the site, but specifically it's steep along the entrance here coming down to River Road, and it's very steep in this courtyard area. So Our landscape architect, Chris McFarland, and I are working on the grades right now to make sure that we're able to prepare the site and propose proper grades in this area so that we're able to use all the amenities that I'll discuss right now. So as you can see, this is, I can speak to the landscape side of things. I am not a landscape architect. Chris is not here today, but if we do have any questions, we'll try to answer them as best as we can. If there's any further questions, we can obviously provide responses to the board as needed. So as I mentioned, we're basically providing a walking area along here. This currently is all impervious. It's all pavement right now. So it's also a benefit in terms of stormwater runoff. The amount of green space that we're proposing is greater than what's already there now. So there's going to be a reduction in runoff for stormwater management. In addition, we're going to better utilize this landscaped area to the along Pawcatuck Ave as well. This, I do want to make note of this. This is still subject to change, like I mentioned. We are going to be evaluating the soil in this area, so there is potential for some sort of contamination in here. We're not anticipating contamination up in this area as much because obviously the mill is down gradient. But I do just want to mention that all of these proposed site layouts are subject to change following the environmental assessment reporting. This shows, this also has not changed since the last time we presented, but this is typical cross sections of what we're dealing with. Up here would be Pawcatuck Avenue, and then basically he's proposing a kind of a regular sort of landscape strip with a water wall, a retaining wall over here, amenity space, and then there is an existing retaining wall over here. One thing I can tell you is because the grades are so steep in this area, there's going to be a gradual slope down towards the retaining wall here and another gradual slope as we go down here, but we are planning on doing an extension to the retaining wall that's down here. I do just want to show that on the map so everyone understands. So that retaining wall that I just mentioned is an existing retaining wall that kind of follows along the, it's parallel to the building along the west side there. And then in addition, he has another cross section where there is a proposed bocce court. It might be a little difficult for us just because of the slopes. I know bocce is supposed to be flat. I don't know if we're going to be able to get that much over in that area. But again, it follows the retaining wall. So there's still some grading that's associated with this, but we are moving forward to evaluate everything and then prepare associated stormwater reports, modeling backup. That'll all be prepared for the site plan review application. This is more of a planting plan. I can't speak to the types of species that Mr. McFarland is proposing in this area, but we are planning on obviously planting additional trees within the landscaped islands that we have over here. We're also planning to put significant trees for blocking of the transformer, and as well as to provide additional stormwater management because of the impact that trees and vegetation have for the basin that would be located over here. These are, I believe these are the retaining walls. Again, these are potentially subject to change following the grades being final, but Mr. McFarland did provide these details for presentation purposes. And with that, I am going to drop it back over to Mr. Seeger for architectural.
Tag team. Yeah, I think the first set of photos here, just to kind of reiterate how bad the condition of the building is now. This is a corner of view looking from the parking lot at the single-story building, which actually that's in pretty good shape. We're looking at just putting one unit there, and there is a walkout basement there. And the wood connector, I call it the wood connector. It was the main entrance for the factory or the mill building, and it's pretty deteriorated. We're looking at removing that. It's between the two buildings. And this view is coming down. You can see how Eric brought up, the site does slope down to the back basement area. You can start to see some that's the area we're looking at putting in a couple garage doors going into the basement. And as far as, yeah, this is actually the lower part of the site, and we have an existing freight elevator that's being abandoned, but we're keeping the shaft in place. And then you can see a little bit of the commercial building beyond. But I think I just wanted to, and this is the lawn area as it looks now. It's, you know, obviously overgrown. So Pawtucket Ave is here, Pawcatuck, and essentially just to let you know the scale of the building, the tower, 5-story tower with a 4-story building. But it's kind of important to, as far as the approach from, I just brought up a first floor plan. Parking is over here. We're introducing a new main entrance to the building here. I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself if we went over this last time, but it's just trying to let you guys get acclimated to how the building's laid out. So the new main entrance here, we have a lobby and mail room, and you actually step down to an elevator lobby, and we're restoring the existing stairwell and maintaining the stair tower. I think you also have an access to get out to this plaza area. But this plaza, I keep calling it a connecting piece because it connects you from the parking over to the Great Lawn to the amenity space. And it also has a canopy connection to the single-story building, which I'll show you. It shows up much better in the renderings. So the site does slope down. This doesn't show the landscaping in the existing loading dock area, but that's going to be a quiet reading park. And then we're looking at entering the basement for parking below the first floor. And that's the elevator shaft. And then there's a commercial building. There is a door right now connecting to the building, but there will be no physical connection. And this is actually Thread Mill 1, the building next to it, which we are actually sharing their stairwell as far as second means of egress. And, you know, again, we do a number of projects working with Epsilon Historic Tax Consultant, and we go through the process of applying for both federal tax credits as well as state tax credits. So we're familiar with the guidelines. Essentially, they want you to restore the building as best as what the original building was. So that's what we'll be doing with the entire building, replacing all the windows. We have to match all the mullions, and as well as the frames, as well as restoring all the brickwork. But this elevation is facing the marina, or facing the Pawcatuck River, and this is where we're introducing a couple garage doors to get to the parking below. And up top here is the parking lot with a new entrance. We are proposing sort of a glass atrium entrance to emphasize where people should go. It's a little modern industrial look sort of component to the building, one of the few things that we're adding. And then this is the canopy I was talking about that can connect to the single-story building, but more importantly acts sort of as a passage to the Great Lawn, or the landscape amenity space. And this is actually the elevation facing the lawn area. Again, this doesn't really exist, this grade change. It's just where we made the section cut. The elevation is not that severe. There won't be a big retaining wall there, but and this is a single-story building. And the elevation below here is actually looking south, but this is the existing Thread Mill 1 building in front of us, and we just are showing the commercial space. Again, we have to we have to submit for replacing metal doors and all the brick restoration and window replacement, as well as the roof for the historic tax credits. This is the material board we presented to the architectural review board, or design review, to let them know the palette we're working with we're keeping everything white, all the metal, but this is the type of glass we'll be using for the atrium. And this is sort of the proposed main entrance into the building with the metal canopy connecting the two. We also are locating the dumpster right now on Pawcatuck Avenue, so we have an enclosure and it's going to be well landscaped as well. But I think the renderings really tell the biggest picture, you know, as far as, in fact, I could have just showed those tonight and we could have been done. But no, I think it's just really great being able to have a 3D tool. This view, I got to speak into the mic, is actually that same view from the photograph of the single-story building and the brick tower. The landscape area would be over here, and then the entrance is right there. So this is a straight-on view of the main entrance and the pass-through, and the grade slopes down to the back, to the lower garage area. And these are just blown-up shots of as far as what we're working with. Trying to do more of an industrial look with any type of new materials or structure that we're doing. This shot has a roof deck we're showing here on the 3rd floor, which I think, well, it's off the 4th floor, but it's on top of the 3rd floor. And you can see how the building steps back, where this roof is on the 4th story. We're adding solar arrays and mechanical systems. We did have discussions with the ARDB in regards to any type of visual, any type of mechanical systems being visible, and we provided them a sightline study. And since the building's so tall and the units are small, they're set back, they won't be visible from Pawcatuck Avenue or from River Road. And this last rendering, obviously the landscape area was a work in progress. This is, at this time, we just put a placeholder there until we knew what we were going to do. And we're pretty close. We like the idea of having a 2-tier, or basically having a lower landscape area here with that retaining wall, that water wall, that creates a little privacy from the street. But I think overall, I think this is a really exciting project for us. We have many opportunities with restoring the building and actually providing some good landscaping for the site and for the tenants for the building. I think I can probably pass it off to Mark if you want, or you can guys, we can open it up for questions.
Yeah, pursuant to the chairman's instructions, we want to open it up to questions. I didn't know, for your convenience, if you wanted Mr. DiNardo and Mr. Seeger to sit here so that if you had a specific question, they don't have to come all the way up. Is that okay?
Fine with us. Make yourselves
All
comfortable.
right. Gentlemen, have a seat.
Does the board have any questions of the presenters? Commissioner Philbrick?
Thank you. I'm still confused about Phase 1, Phase 2, Thread Mill 2, Thread Mill 3. If this is a master plan, and you have a big section delineated for Thread Mill 3 in Phase 2, is that a different master plan? Is that incorporated in this? I'm totally confused in the master plan versus all these different phases and thread mills.
Well, like any smart lawyer, I'd defer to the planner first for his explanation before I would weigh in on that, because he addresses that in his report. He points out, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Can you clarify that for me, Clifton?
I can try my best.
Thank you.
So there's a couple elements at play as part of this, and I'm gonna try to holistically go process by process. Typically with these zone change applications, specifically ones that are to these conservation or preservation type districts, IHRD being one of them, architect or agricultural being another, NDD, etc. One of the intents of going through this process with the zone change is basically to create a new zoning district with new requirements, and then do a site development that would be atypical to the current zone of the site, which is MC80. So, if you look at the current regulations, MC80, you can't have residential there. They're proposing residential in a mill building, so there needs to be some sort of zoning change in order to accommodate that. So one of the purposes of the IHRD, as Jason Vincent, proposed at the time, was to allow for this, rehabilitation of existing structures. In the regulations in section 7.19, it establishes the process and purpose of the IHRD zoning district. What it does say is there is supposed to be 5 different components to a project's approval. 1, establishment of the zoning district. 2, a master plan. 3, that's a development of a site plan. 4, zoning permit. 5, building permit. Just standard process that you go through. For any other project, 3 through 5, the first 2, are establishing the zoning district. What it says in the regulations under 7.19.3 in the establishment of the district, it states that the commission must make 2 judgments in terms of establishing an IHRD zone. And those 2 are basically adhering to the principles of the POCD, the most recent one being the 2015 document, and meeting the principles of zoning regulation compliance under 7.19, so it's citing itself. Basically what I pulled out in terms of reaching compliance with section 7.19, I pulled out section 7.19.2, the statement of purpose. So the determination the commission needs to make in terms of approving a zone change application is, does it meet the statement of purpose for the zoning district, the IHRD district, and does it meet the POCD's requirements or desire for the area, which I believe Mark explained in his introduction. The other element, the development of a master plan as required and stated in section 7.19.4, cites going through the site plan development process. So what I would say in terms of answering your question is that the language in the regulations itself is very circular. It doesn't give you a good path because you can't have a master plan without a site plan per the requirements. So instead of proposing or approving a master plan tonight, what I think is before the commission is just the establishment of the zoning district itself. What the applicant then has to do is provide all the requirements for a site plan, which in turn would meet the master plan requirements. The only things I called out in my report are the things that are missing from the site plan development requirements, which include the bulk and use requirements for the zoning district, includes the soil erosion, sedimentation control, traffic study, all the environmental elements. All of that stuff hasn't been solidified yet, as it would be for a site plan.
I think, Ben, if I can, 'cause I think I know where your question was going, so if I can ask, this particular proposal that we're discussing with the mill building, and it's mill 2, is that correct? Oh, sorry. Apologies. So this would be phase 1? Is that my understanding? Because when I look on the plan here, and I think this is where Ben was going, then I see phase 2 over here, which would be thread mill 3, which is not in existence yet, where it states you would build another building that'd be architecturally consistent with the other 2 thread mill buildings.
Yeah.
Is that?
Well, first I was going to ask one of my technicians to be able to put the map that you're looking up on the screen, because then everybody can look and see what we're talking about.
Total agreement.
All right, magically it's appeared. Okay, so in our initial discussions with the planner, we noted that there was an undeveloped area.
Correct.
And so we inquired as to what would be a potential use of that area. And we came upon the fact that if the area could be developed, it would be comparable, at least in the concept, of the number of residential units that are being proposed for thread mill 2.
Okay.
And so what this is a concept which is really going to be dictated by all of the data that will be gathered for the site plan review. So, and there are many variables that will come into effect. One issue is if we are successful at being able to locate 40 parking units underneath the building, that will relieve the outdoor parking requirements for thread mill 2, in effect opening up the possibility of parking for phase 2. So the size, the number of the units, the footprint, all of that is going to be dictated by the site plan that is presented for your review in the second phase. So Mr. DiNardo may do his site plan and his parking calculations and say, after I've done this complete site plan review, there are only X amount of parking spaces available. There is only a certain area that can be located for a stormwater drainage that would be generated.
Just want to make sure she was okay.
Yeah,
Got
water.
Thank you. Okay, if I may, sir, just because I do think, I think I understand now what is being proposed, at least in this current iteration. This is phase 1, which involves thread mill 2. Is that a fair statement?
That is an accurate
Okay,
statement.
that's what I think we were trying to get clarity on. Thread mill 3 does not exist. That would be potentially phase 2, correct?
That is
Okay,
correct.
did that kind of get to sort of where you were going?
Sort of, but it's still, you're including the southernmost piece of the property as part of your master plan, correct? You're incorporating the entire piece of property into the,
So yeah, where I was getting at before is that the establishment of the district says all of this, including both phase 1, thread mill 2, and thread mill 3, are going to be in the IHRD district.
understood.
The master plan sets the general requirements for the site as any zone, but particularly the items that are missing out of this proposal are the bulk and use requirements for the zoning district. The reason why that is so important is that those bulk and use requirements would dictate what happens in phase 2 thread mill 3 building. So without that, having the blank space on the page is good enough to establish the district, but the commission and the developer aren't going to know what to build there until they establish the bulk and use requirements for the district itself. They don't have to establish bulk and use requirements for phase 1 because that is the current structure. They're not adding a new structure, right? The existing structure is what's staying, they're just renovating it. So bulk use requirements are basically null and void. The only item that is up in the air would be what uses would be permitted in the commercial building that's proposed. Since there is no delineation of what those potential options could be, basically there's nothing currently allowed to be in that structure without creating the master plan, which the applicant is proposing to do through the site plan process, as opposed to now. But the point being for the phase 2, the thread mill 3 project, is that if the applicant comes back to construct a new structure as part of that, whatever that design is going to be an amendment to the master plan. Same thing that the commission has approved numerous times for the Mystic Seaport, as an example. So any change to that site is an amendment to the master plan. This would follow that exact same format.
Thanks, that's very helpful.
Thank you, Clint.
And if I could try to answer your question as well, Ben, or add some confusion to it. Essentially, phase 2 is just a concept. There's not going to be 58 units on it. It's going to be dictated by all of the other site conditions. That was just a number that was arrived at as a concept based on the fact that the thread mill was going to have in and around the same amount of units. we know that if and when anything is built on phase 2, it's going to have to be architecturally consistent with Thread Mill 2. It's going to have to be subject to the site plan review. It's going to have to be subject to the architectural design board review. The whole process that we've gone through will be replicated. But again, as Mr. Vincent pointed out, if the commission receives the approval, receives the concept and finds some merit in it, they're not signing off on it. They're saying, okay, this is a concept that we would consider subject to all of the site plan review data that we require. But I mean, largely what takes place on phase 2, Thread Mill 3 so-called, which we all know doesn't exist, is going to be dictated by what takes place on Thread Mill 2. So it's kind of like, you know, what follows after the main course, if you will.
But they'll be subject to reviews by this board.
They'll be subject to reviews. We will, the notion of deja vu
dynamic
will
process.
continue, because the next time we come before you, we will have an amended map amendment that will show with clarity what is taking place site-wise, design-wise on Treadmill 2, and it will also incorporate, you know, what could potentially take place. You could be in a situation where you look at this and you say, well, we don't like this here, or we want to reduce it to this, and how can you prove to us that the site can support that? And
Right.
that's our burden.
I totally understand that now. It's when someone says, this is our concept, and it's a blank piece of paper. To my mind, that's not a concept. So
Well-
even if it was a minimal drawing, or a ghost drawing, or a modicum of a drawing, any kind of a drawing would be a concept. But when it's a blank piece of paper and it's called a concept, to my mind, that's not a concept. It's a blank piece of paper, and I was just trying to clarify what it is. It will be an amendment down the road. I get that, so we can move on to other questions.
Yeah,
Thank you.
There's such a disparity between what's there on Treadmill 1. It's all there. It's a concept, but it's real. So you got it.
May I ask a little bit of a 101 question about our zoning? With when one of these floating zone, or if we were to approve the map change and this became the Heritage Mill District, you know, that allows the applicant to move forward with investment and developing the plan further. What happens if the feasibility of the plan falls apart at some point after we approve the map change? Does it then revert to the current zone? Or is it in a strange limbo where it's in a new zone where nothing can be done to it without a master plan?
So following the approval of the district, the developer applicant has 24 months to get an approved site plan. They can ask for an extension for up to another 24 months. So basically 4 years. They have 4 years to execute and develop and approve a site plan.
And if it were to change,
if
if they were
they-
to sell the property, it would automatically revert to the current MC 80 zone?
A new developer could take it on and come in and get an approved site plan, so the clock isn't.
So the map
it's-
amendment
It's to the
goes
site,
with
not,
the
it's to the
property.
site, not the owner.
Got it.
And so they'd have 24 months from the date of approval to get a site plan approved, or else it would revert back to MC80.
Okay, great, thank you.
And I would just add to your question that the reality is that it's going to take 3 or 4 years to remediate the site. It's going to take at least 3 or 4 years to construct the building in such a fashion that it's habitable. So the limbo of 48 months is going to be really what the scope of the construction of the plan is.
Well, your limbo will, I assume, come to a close before the remediation happens, because you guys will have the site assessment, the environmental assessment done what's the timetable on that? Sometime in the next months, year?
I can speak to that. We're currently coordinating with Susan on scheduling.
Yep.
There was a waiver that was put in place to ensure that my company, Verdantis, would be doing the environmental assessment work because of typically you have to go out to bid, but we were contracted to essentially prepare the grant application for the assessment work, which was roughly about, I believe, close to $400,000 in total. So we're going to be doing the assessment work, and I believe that that's going to be starting within the next month, and it depends on what you find, where the assessment kind of goes a little haywire. I mean, I would say that the initial assessment work and at least the initial reporting should be done within 6 months.
Okay.
Yep.
So I guess the point I was trying to get at is that you will have the 48 months once the map change has been approved to have a site plan and master plan approved, or it reverts to the current zone. And so it seems like a lot of what you are leaving blank spaces as concepts for right now is that there are so many unknowns, and I'm just trying to get a sense of, it sounds like it is feasible to overcome enough of those to get to having a site plan and master plan in the time required.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note we can't proceed without that. So if we can't proceed, if we can't present to the commission in site plan review a master plan that meets the criteria that the planner has discussed, we can't proceed. So,
Right.
And I don't think there's a lot of people who would come in and take this project on at this point. So we bought into it, and we're not going anywhere until it's completed. I know that's not something that you can take home, or...
I'm not sure how I'm coming across, but I'm more asking these questions out of concern for you guys and the hope that this project, is not getting shot in the foot. I would assume not. It seems like you all know what you're doing, but just wanted to clarify some of this stuff.
Okay, I mean, Mr. Cozzens is here, and he's done this 3 or 4 times. If you want to try to ask him or get some insight to how a process like this...
Oh, no, I'm
Okay.
happy with the answers
Okay.
I've got right now. Thank you.
Okay.
What's encouraging to me, as I see this at this phase, is that what a lot of developers would shy away from, doing expensive A2 surveys, expensive site plan development, expensive renderings of elevation views. This is a serious project, and you wouldn't have undertaken that unless you intend to see it through. Those are very advanced drawings. I realize they're conceptual from the standpoint that you don't know a lot of what's going to come out of the EA yet, but the drawings are in their advanced phase. It's not like these are Class D surveys, these are Class A2 surveys. It's not like the elevations are colored, watercolor drawings. They're actually architectural elevations that are drawn to scale. So this is in the advanced stage of consideration, and you've laid the groundwork for a master plan even though you don't have one. And I understand from my work on similar projects that the master plan will unfold from the EA.
That's exactly correct.
And the other studies that you have to do. Just a couple of quick questions from my perspective. Are you done, Andy?
Yes.
Okay. The civil engineer mentioned, I'm sorry, I don't remember your name. The civil
Eric.
engineer mentioned that the property was not in a flood zone. Is that both the 100 and 500 year, or just the 100?
The property is within the 500-year flood zone. But it's important to note that the first floor, the ground level, is above the 100-year flood elevation. However, there's no proposed fixed structures within the flood zone, either the 100 or 500-year flood.
Okay. No wave action zones, no limois issues?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. My other question is just curiosity more than anything. the architect mentioned that you're gonna replace the windows. You're really not gonna replace the windows. You're gonna rebuild the windows, correct?
Yeah, just, we're replacing the windows in their entirety, so includes the frames, you know, the blocking, all the casing.
So you're gonna replicate the windows that were there?
Yeah, we actually provided a window package for the historic tax credits. So
That's
Jonathan.
perfect. That's just
okay.
what I wanted to see.
Yeah, Jonathan went in and had everything documented, so we have to actually replicate. They're going to be external and internal muttons. You know, the grids all. Actually, they're metal windows. We're not doing wood windows. The metal windows are allowed because of the, they're painted anyway.
Okay.
But they're, you know, they're top of the line. Even
Thank
the
you.
arches, every type of window we're duplicating.
Thank you. That's the extent of my questions. Gary, any questions?
The last time you were here, I think you had mentioned the small parcel or building was owned by someone else.
Oh, yeah, I wanted to talk about that,
Okay.
if that's okay. If we could put the map showing the site plan again. When we spoke initially at our workshop, either that's
This one?
yeah, that's fine. The building that fronts on River Road is owned by the Norwest Marina that recently changed ownership. So we've been in discussion with them about that building, not very fruitful discussions, but it is an area that, you know, we don't have any control over, but it's also something that they have plans to make improvements to their marina, and those plans are in some fashion going to include that 18,000 square foot warehouse. What they're going to do with it, how they're going to accomplish that, I don't know, but certainly as we present our proposal, it will have some connection with what they will be coming before you with. So you'll have an opportunity to get, you know, their input on that. Right now, we don't have any control over it. We're just showing it. The building itself, the property is defined by the outline of the building. There is no side yard or setback. The property is within the confines of the perimeter of the building. So whatever they do will have to address the zoning. I mean, I'm of the opinion, and it's just my own opinion, that, you know, the building itself presents obstacles to development because it doesn't have any, you can't drive around it, there's no parking, and one of the concerns that the Architectural Review Board had, and as did the planner, is the issue of sidewalks and how, I know it's the town's policy to encourage pedestrian access all through the town, and everybody has delayed their travels on Route 1, seeing that that's exactly what the town is doing. There is currently on River Road sidewalks that begin on the southern portion of Norwest Marina. So across from this project, there are sidewalks that extend the full length of both the imaginary thread mill 3, the real thread mill 2, and thread mill 1. They're not on our side of the street, they're on the Norwest Marina side. They start at the southern border, they go all the way to the limit of the northern boundary of the Northwest Marina property, and then they stop. And you can cross the street, and at the intersection of River Road and Pawcatuck Avenue, right where they stop on the Norwest property, a sidewalk starts and goes right into downtown Pawcatuck. And at some point, probably within a half a mile of Pawcatuck Avenue, where you get down to the old Harris Graphics facilities, there are sidewalks on both sides of the street. So That's one issue, because we don't have control of a significant area of the frontage on River Road. And in actuality, if you look at the map carefully, I don't even know if it's feasible to place sidewalks on River Road, because that 18-foot square warehouse is like 4 or 5 feet from the traveled way of River Road. There's a little bump out there, and so they would have to make some significant alteration of the layout of that building in order to accommodate sidewalks there. The Architectural Review Board was also concerned about the sidewalk accessibility on Pawcatuck Avenue, leaving River Road and going up behind, if you will, the mill site. And if you walk up from Riverview, from River Road, excuse me, on Pawcatuck Avenue, on the Poco side of the street, they have a sidewalk, and then it's interrupted by a couple of parking spaces that are parallel to the road. So you're walking on a sidewalk, and then you run into a car. So you have to walk around it, and then there's another series of sidewalks interrupted by more parallel parking. So certainly my client is more than willing to provide pedestrian access, but we inherit the first probably 250 or 300 feet on Pawcatuck Avenue that have already been configured in this sidewalk, parking space, sidewalk scenario. I hope I've explained that adequately. We don't really have any pictures of that sidewalk.
Sounds like a good master plan issue to me.
I don't have my master plan with me right now.
I'm getting wrapped around the axle just with the description, so.
Yeah, okay.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question? Just out of curiosity, actually 2 questions. First one is, you had mentioned earlier that you're not going to be able to fully weatherproof or cover over the building until the summer. Is that true?
Yes, that's true.
Okay. Can I ask what steps between now and then would you take to protect the structure, so it doesn't further deteriorate?
I hate to do that again, but I think it's time that I introduce Mr. Cousins.
That's quite all right.
Jonathan, could you please answer that question?
Hello, everyone. Good evening. So we've already replaced over 100 beams in the building. Prior to any expected snow, we will be shoring up the building. So essentially, we're going to be cross-bracing all of the current beams that we've replaced to each other. So the building is kind of like meshed in nice and tight. We'll be cross-bracing the brick walls that have no roof structure attached to it, diagonally down to the floorboards, and we'll be cross-bracing all of the roof boards that are having trouble, essentially. So the whole building will essentially be wound nice and tight like a rubber band. And in the wintertime, when we have snow, we're essentially allowing all of the snowfall to essentially go and kind of melt essentially through the building into the basement, where we're going to have it pumped out. So it'll just essentially melt and be pumped out as it comes down. And a lot of the rotted subfloor is essentially being removed. So there's sufficient, there's improved drainage compared to how it was before.
Okay. Where would what you're pumping out, where would that be pumped out to? Is there a
Just
basin or?
out the window.
Okay, but out towards the river, or where, I guess where would the water go that you're pumping out? I'm trying to get and understand maybe the volume and where that volume would go.
Right, it would just be as the snow is melting. So, we can work with our civil engineers and on how best to kind of structure that before any potential snowfall.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
And I had one question, Cliff, that might be for you, but since the other building that is owned by the marina was brought up, just for clarity's sake, this application, were we to grant it, would not include that marina building, correct?
Correct. That marina building will stay MC80.
Okay, thank you. That's all I had.
Anyone else have any questions? Clifton, any comments? No comments? Okay, before we open it up to anyone else from the audience? Any questions from the presenters of us?
No, this is our first opportunity to hear from the public, so we'll anxiously await their comments before we answer those questions.
Okay. So we had a sign-up sheet. If you didn't sign up, don't worry, you can still speak. We would like you to ultimately sign up, and I'll take them in the order that they sign up. So the procedure is, you please come forward when I read your name, speak into the microphone, identify yourself, your address, and you make your statement. Everyone who makes a statement will be given an opportunity to have rebuttal time, and we'll go back and forth with rebuttal time until everyone is satisfied that they've said their piece. You'll have an opportunity for rebuttal. You'll have an opportunity for rebuttal. So the first person on the agenda here is Patricia Morris. Good evening.
Yes, my name is Patricia Morris, and I have to apologize for my handwriting. Between arthritis and Raynaud's phenomenon, I have lost the use of my writing hand. As you can see, my address is 5 Clark Street. 5 Clark Street is the entrance for the William Clark Thread Mill number 1. We're quite excited about what's going on next door. We've seen in the short period of the 5 years I've been here in the mill, how much the mill next door has deteriorated. And I know it is going to be a challenge, but mill number 1 is excited and has gotten involved in and hopefully been a big help because we have the blueprints and everything from mill number 1. Mill number 1 was built in 1892 by William Clark. He completed it in 1 year. We have a small historical committee, and we've got the album half finished about mill number 1. And I have in the album microfilm from the Westerly Narragansett Weekly, going back to the start of the mill till it was completed. I have here tonight is Eric Johnson is the superintendent of mill number 1. I know how difficult it is sometimes trying to read a blueprint. If anyone here would be interested, I'm sure Eric would be willing to give you a tour to see what we've had accomplished. We have, we have apartments, of course. We have 58. And we're located in both Clark Street and River Road. Part of mill number 1 is facing mill number 1. And I just want to speak for the fact that this is, being a history buff, this is so exciting to see the opportunity for this mill to be completed. And I appreciate very much the presentation that was given this evening. And I'm sure we're going to have questions like everybody else. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. Thank you very much. Next on the list is Richard Daddy. Evening, sir.
Good evening. My name is Richard Dottie, and I live at 24 Pawcatuck Avenue. My driveway basically faces what you guys are proposing to have as one of your entrances to this parking lot on Route 2, Phase 2. Was formerly called, or I used to see a sign that said American Way. And people used to, I've lived there over 20 years now. People used to use that as a through street until the folks who owned the building put a barricade on the one side. And that seemed to take care of it. But I've had numerous concerns about, and I'm not opposed to anything that you guys are doing, except the fact that it seems that it was a little less than, how you want to call, forthcoming, in that you proposed a 58-unit building that's already there. But now I come to find out, sitting here, that there's a possibility for another 58 units. Can anybody tell me how many units are in first phase? How many? 51. So when they proposed 58, it's because of an additional residential building that you want to put there? There's a separate residential building that you guys are talking about, right? Yes, sir. And that is the brick building that is directly across the street from you? No. No. Okay, so you're going to tear that down?
Sir, if you would, direct your questions.
I'm sorry.
to us. That's okay.
I'm sorry.
It's impossible to keep track of the meeting. They'll
Okay.
have an opportunity for rebuttal. If you do have questions, direct the questions through us to the.
Okay. I'm not, this is my first meeting, so
No, that's okay.
I'm not familiar with the protocol.
You're doing
It
fine.
does seem as though the whole, how do you want to call it, situation was kind of sprung on me now. Do I understand correctly that in the, what do you guys call it, the third phase, that you want to put additional, and you're proposing, if everything goes right on the site, another 58 residential units?
I think what you're talking about is the same thing that Ben was a little confused about earlier, where it says phase 2 on the southern portion of the property.
Phase 2.
And that, I don't know if phase was maybe the best word. I think that's just a question mark still, whether or not they will be able to seek approval down the road to put something else over there. I think that won't come up until there is a plan.
So as I said, I'm not opposed to it. I'm just wondering if there's any possibility that, well, first of all, answer me this. Phase 2 is the existing structure that he was talking about wrapping up like a rubber band.
No, that's phase 1.
That's one. Okay, so the building that's completed already, the building that's occupied already, we're not talking about that at all. There's no phase 1, 2, so that's
Correct.
So phase 2 is the existing building with the tower.
So
No.
what's
Phase 1 is the current building that they're going to.
Phase 1
Correct, of what they're proposing.
is the existing building with the tower
Existing building with the tower. That's
and the standalone brick building.
correct? That's phase 1.
right.
And you're going to tear out the wood tunnel.
Correct. That's what they're proposing.
Okay, so now I don't have to ask you what the construction on the is there going to be a new residential building that you're going to put up?
That's the question mark for after this one is done. So phase 1 is renovating the existing structure as proposed. After that's done, and they said maybe 5 years or more that could take for construction of the existing structure. They're saying that potentially after that they might come back and ask if they could build a second brand new structure, but that's undecided and that won't be decided here tonight.
So,
And they couldn't do that without seeking additional approvals.
yeah, I understand that.
So regardless, if phase 1 is approved, they couldn't do phase 2 without coming back to this board, and you'd get a chance to look at that separately.
I
And
understand
comment
that.
on that separately.
Okay, I do understand that. So can anybody address how much infrastructure impact it will be? In other words, water treatment plant. We're obviously capable of handling all this new sewage.
That's
We
all
don't
part
know.
of- That's all part of the site
We
planning
don't know yet,
process, is
right?
that infrastructure is assessed, the letter from the local water company, that they not only can meet the domestic water requirements, but they can meet the requirements of fire suppression as well. So all those aspects of infrastructure, sewer and water are looked into.
So now if those folks come back and say that, hey, you guys can't put 58 units, you're gonna have to put 30 or whatever, and it doesn't seem economically feasible, does that leave us in the lurch as a community, or?
I mean, you can only build what you can safely build, so.
Yes, but I'm
not gonna
understanding
try
it's in other words, you don't know what you can safely build, right?
At
Because
this
you
point,
haven't
there's a
had
lot
the-
of unanswered questions.
I'm sorry?
At this point, there's a lot of questions
Yeah,
that
that's-
require further.
Yeah, there are a lot. Okay, so you're gonna put indoor that's great, I mean, I understand that, you're gonna try and put some parking.
Again,
indoor.
just address the board if you would, sir.
Okay,
Thank you.
you're gonna try and put some parking in, well, that's good, okay. So there won't be a through street through there, right? Through the access and egress that exists now.
We'll find out.
I think they can respond to that after that. Yeah, when they were about, they can respond to that question.
Okay. So you're thinking it's gonna take at least 3 years to remediate
That's what they said.
the site? Okay. And any additional residential construction, you don't know how many stories or what the limitation is?
All of that would be the subject of a master plan that would come back to this commission for approval. And that
Okay.
master plan is not developed yet.
Okay, another concern I had, and again, like I'm saying, I'm not opposed to this, I'm just, have concerns about lighting. I have had different lighting configurations in that parking lot. They were concerned with some security there and wound up shining lights, and it's like light pollution, basically, shining lights into my house, bedroom. I can't make my house dark. I can now because that's taken down. Now, there was some other lighting that was put over in, I guess, the southernmost part of and that's existing today, right now. But that doesn't shine as much into my house. But if there could be some type of, I don't know, baffle, barn door, a spot instead of a flood that would
Let me explain site illumination to you and how careful we are with respect to that. There's a photometric plan which essentially evaluates the footprint of the light. And that footprint of the light has to stop at the property line. It can't create glare outside, it can't light up the sky, it's gotta be dark sky compliant, and it can't shed light beyond the property lines.
Well,
Shields to protect you from glare, and shields to direct the light downward, and confining the light to the site only are all issues that are dealt with on a very detailed photometric plan that will unfold as a part of the site planning documents that again will have to come back to this commission for more review.
Now,
We're very careful about all of that.
okay, now that'll happen going forward, right?
Correct, that's another going
Okay,
forward.
because before it was up, the owner just put up lights, whatever, didn't notify the town, whatever.
Well, we can't address what other owners done with other pieces of property.
Right,
It's not before us tonight.
I'm sorry?
What you're talking about is not before us tonight.
Right, okay, I'm
So
sorry.
It's out of our
Again.
jurisdiction, it's out of our,
Okay, I have one last question, and I want to know if you are going to continue to have marine activity in that section while you're, it's not up there anymore, but the southernmost part here, where what are you calling it, phase 3? Is that?
I think that's a question for the applicant.
I'm sorry?
I think that's a question for the applicant, and they'll address that on rebuttal.
The applicant?
The developer.
Okay, yeah, all right, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks for listening to me.
Thank you
Appreciate
very
it.
much.
Appreciate it.
Next person on the list is Eric Johnson. Evening, sir.
My name is Eric Johnson. I live in Mill 1, or the thread mill development owned by POCO, and I also manage the property for POCO. The way I understand tonight, we're just looking for an approval of a zone change, which seems like a no-brainer. We share a wall. This building that they want to put in this zone shares a wall with a building that's already in that zone. It's all connected. My property line is literally the wall to Mr. Cozen's building. Nothing but good can come out of changing this zone or approving this zone change. I've been with POCO for several years, and this building has been an eyesore, has been a hazard. We're fortunate that we haven't had a major catastrophe there. There's been trespassers there, there's been fires in there. One of the first things the new developer did when they came in is secure the site and put up security cameras to make sure that that didn't continue. So I think they're going to be nothing but a good neighbor and a good contributor to the town of Stonington. So I would propose, or I would encourage you to approve the zone plan change so that this development can go forward and not continue to deteriorate. If they hadn't come in when they did, we'd probably be looking at a pile of bricks like we had at Connecticut Casting. Unfortunately, that was allowed to go on too long, and this is finally, we have a chance to save this building. And I think that this is the right thing to do, would be to change that zone.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you.
That's helpful. Next person on the list is Ben Tamsky. Evening, Ben.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Yeah, good news indeed. Nothing but good, as Mr. Eric said. Nothing but good can come of this project. What I did hear 10 weeks ago from Attorney Kepple was a promise of affordable housing. And I heard it again tonight at the beginning of the presentation, but I didn't hear anything else about it during the presentation. So we have no details. You folks are acting in your legislative capacity with a map amendment. You have the most discretion that you have. You've got wide latitude as to what you approve. This is a perfect opportunity to ask for more and ask for affordable housing. Find out tonight what they have in mind, how much. 8-30G requires 30%. 8-30G allows a lot of benefits to the developer. By granting this map amendment, this isn't an 8-30G project, but by granting this map amendment under the floating zone IHRD, you folks are giving the developer a huge benefit. Ask for something in return. The town needs more affordable housing. We finally, after your deliberations 2 years ago on the Affordable Housing Plan, we finally have a Housing Opportunities Commission that was seated last week, or had their first meeting last week. The state wants us to achieve 10% affordable housing. Anything less, anytime we build new housing with less than that number, we move further away from that goal. And to actually try to get closer to that goal, we need 30%. So I hope you'll ask for affordable housing. I hope you'll ask tonight and find out just what their plan is to provide it. Thank you.
Good point, Ben. Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to speak regarding this application? Laura? If you would just state your name, please, ma'am, and your address.
Horrible at public speaking, but anyway, Cheryl Cook. My father owns property on Bigelow Street that abuts this. And this may not be the appropriate venue, and if it's not, I understand, I'll come back. When Northeast Marine Liquidation put in for a variance to change that for boat storage, there was a 50-foot buffer zone that was part of one of the stipulations for the approval on that to the abutting properties, including my father's. And I want to know, does that carry over if this just zoning changes to a historic mill district, or is that now null and void and we have to deal with whatever the regular setbacks would be.
It's a good question. I don't know if we'd have to do some research on that to see.
A variance would carry over. In order to get rid of it, basically, you'd have to go through and ask for that to be removed.
Okay.
But it would carry over from, is it on an adjacent property?
Yes.
Or is it on
Yeah.
this property?
No, it's on their property. It's a 50-foot buffer between the property, our property line, and where they can do anything,
Then that,
essentially.
it would still be in effect.
Okay.
Can you look into that, Clifton? To see what the stipulations were, if indeed it was in effect?
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Laura? Someone else in the back had their, okay. Good evening. Could you just state your name and address, please?
Right, Heather Danaher, and I'm at 9 Green Avenue. I'm asking, I understood, or maybe I'm confused, the zone change that we spoke of earlier seemed to exclude the northwest building that's in the middle of the property. Is it possible tonight to maybe go ahead and approve the zone change for only phase 1 of this proposal, so that it wouldn't include that south lot?
I imagine we could do any portion of it. That's not what's requested.
It's not 2 lots, it's all one.
I understand,
lot.
but, so you wouldn't be able to separate this. So this zone change would allow them to continue to develop, you know, barring master plan and site approval. But it would allow them to continue to do that.
The entire
Not
parcel.
without, let me just say, not without substantial additional approvals and public hearings.
Yes, no,
So,
I understand.
so it's not like the zone change is carte blanche to, you know, charge forward and develop the entire site. It's simply phase 1 that you know is under consideration, and additional site planning, master planning, and additional approvals and public hearings before this board would be required before any additional phases would be considered.
And then what other uses are allowed within this zone change?
So that's part of what's currently outstanding, and what the applicant has to provide is both the bulk requirements, which basically states what the buffers are, how tall your building
I
is,
guess maybe my
etc.
question is a little bit more broad than that.
The
We're
other
being
element
asked
is the
to talk
use.
about a zone change to a heritage mill restoration zone. What else, what other kinds of uses are allowed in that zone?
The applicant has to provide a list of items that they want as part of the master plan that they could do. So what they're asking for currently is at least the residential element, but there's a proposed commercial structure
So
on the
there is
site.
no use definition of this particular zone.
No,
So it could be a commercial zone as well.
correct. The intent of it is to basically readapt and preserve with the promote diversified housing opportunities in combination with commercial, retail, or office use where such mixed use is appropriate.
Okay,
So the primary is residential, and then the other elements of commercial, retail, or office have to be decided.
The last meeting I was at, there was some talk about a brewery on this site. Is that still part of this plan? Although the plan isn't being submitted, so I don't really know, maybe I'm in the wrong phase of this discussion, but, you know, is that an allowable use if we approve this zone change?
If they come back and they show us that in a master plan, it would be the subject of a future public hearing. So you would have an opportunity to comment on that.
Okay.
And that is not before us this evening.
Okay.
So-
And the access directly to this property is going to be off of Pawcatuck Avenue, River Road, or both?
Both.
So one, the American Way Road, which I believe this gentleman referred to, would be part of the access?
I'll let the applicant answer that.
I don't know.
Yeah, you can answer, you're gonna answer, you get a chance to rebut this and answer those questions.
Can anybody tell me who the current owner of this property is? They are, we've closed on it.
Pawcatuck, Riverview, LLC.
Sorry, I was scribbling stuff down and I've gotten my stuff, If the zone change is approved, can they still demo the building? If they
I think that
decided,
building is protected, isn't it? You know,
Okay.
it could not be demolished without, you know, significant inputs from like the State Historic Preservation Officer
Okay.
and a variety of other approvals that would be required.
okay. And the roof deck is solar only, that's the only usage being proposed?
That's up to the applicant to answer that.
Okay. I think that was all I had. Thank you. And again, I'm not opposed to the project. I'm
No, they're good
starting to
questions.
figure out if we approve the zone change and then we find out later that the use isn't what we really want for our neighborhood, then that would be a concern.
We understand your apprehensions and with regard to the fact that other commercial uses are allowed, but nothing is allowed without the approval of a master plan.
Right.
So the change of zone allows them to come forward with a master plan. That would be the subject of another public hearing, and there would be additional input. We would welcome your input at that point.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes. Good evening.
Good evening, Chairman Shan and
Good
Commissioners. My name is Laura Graham, and I live at 2 Moss Street here in Pawcatuck. I can hardly contain my excitement about this project, and I haven't been following it as closely as you have, but there is one thing I would like to ask, as Ben did about the affordable housing, is sidewalks and cycling infrastructure. That is something I hear over and over again from people requesting, and as we strive to have a healthier community, the vicinity of downtown Westerly and Pawcatuck, I think sidewalks, if they're at all possible, should be a priority. Thank you.
Good points. Thank you, Laura. Anyone else that desires to speak that hasn't spoken? Yes, ma'am.
Good evening. My name is Sharon Adams. I live at 25 North Broad Street. I had some concerns similar to what the gentleman board member had said earlier regarding preventing further deterioration of this building while we're waiting for it to be made weather tight. So the owner talked about snow melt and funneling it down and everything like that. That to me implies if you're funneling it down, there's some type of issue with the roof if you're allowing it to come down and funnel down. And even if that's just my erroneous thought, we live in New England. Last winter was mild. It's still New England. So we know we can get pretty significant winter storms. That if we get a significant winter storm, that's a lot of weight on a flat roof. If it's followed by really cold weather, that snow melt is going to take a while, prolonging the time of a lot of snow weight on a flat roof. That's probably old. The other concern is there's multiple missing windows. So how are we addressing rainfall that will come in? Any type of hurricane we may get. Yes, they've talked about buttressing it, but we all know, we've heard the storms of Cat 5s hitting Tampa last year where buildings, hotels, things like that suffered significant damage even though deemed structurally sound. Rodent infestation, which is an issue in there. So these are all things that I have concerned about to prevent further decline while we're waiting to make this building potentially weather tight. I think there are things that need to be considered and thought about. You know, for me, the answer that was given about funneling snow melt down and pumping it somewhere also caused me concern about where are we pumping the water to, given we have a river right there, and the building is known to have PCBs and other hazardous materials in it. So not great to be running that out into the river. And I'm not saying that's going to happen, but you know, it's going downhill. So these are the concerns that I have and would very much like to hear answers to this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess the good news is that they have replaced some beams in the building. They do have a plan. It sounds like it's prioritized. I don't think anybody here is making any assurances that you know, the building is safe, but you know, that's the owner's responsibility and you know, the owner's risk as well. Anyone else like to speak on this application? Does the applicant require rebuttal time? And there are certain questions that I think we'd like an answer to. Particularly the affordable housing question, Mark, if you could. What are the specific plans, and are you prepared to file a declaration on the land records with regard to affordable housing?
Yes, hello. Yes, for affordable housing, we will be doing 20% of the housing as affordable. That is 80% of the AM, so that would be a resident making up to 80% of the AMI for the area, for Stonington. It's a requirement of the grants that we're requesting from the state of Connecticut for environmental remediation, as well as a couple other grants that we'll be applying for. So that is what we are planning to do. In terms of doing, I mean, I guess some of the questions were about, you know, I guess doing the entire site as affordable. That's an entirely different animal. There's another financial tool to tackle that called the low income housing tax credits. Those are extremely competitive. Those are essentially federal tax dollars passed on to the state and given to certain developers who apply. There's a long backlog of those, and that would create an entirely different project. I mean, the developer doesn't own the project. Those are essentially is 90% subsidized by the federal government, essentially, and then the other 10% is found through loans or other means. So we're doing the best we can with the site and trying to make this financially feasible for this project.
So 20%, 20?
Yes, correct, 20%.
Would you consider 30%?
I would not, no. The financial feasibility of this project is already right on a line of essentially becoming impractical. To push it to 30% when not required to by any grant programs would make it undoable, essentially.
And you're prepared to file a declaration on the land records?
Yes.
Okay. Ben?
Well, there are a lot more questions the public needs answered.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure who's up for answering those. The through street, marine activity, buffer on the Bigelow Street, access, all sorts of things.
Hi, yes, Eric DiNardo with Verdantis. I tried to keep track as best as I could with some of the questions coming in. First, I'd like to address the concern in terms of we have no record of any sort of roadway going through. Not saying that there wasn't, but we just have to deal with the site conditions as they are. One thing to note that the existing curb cuts from both River Road and Pawcatuck Ave are going to be utilized. We're not asking for an additional alteration of the existing curb cuts. We're just using what's already there. And in addition, to minimize, it's no longer showing, but to minimize any sort of traffic coming in and out, we're actually putting in the island, the center island, to help kind of restrict people from coming into the property too quickly, and then serving as essentially a one-way travel lane, so that it kind of restricts any sort of fast speeds in that area. Moving on to the existing or proposed water loading and fire suppression and sewer. We are coordinating, like I mentioned, we're coordinating with local utilities and service providers on the supply, and as well as our MEP, who's actually not here, who can speak to it better, but the existing water surface or service from River Road is actually adequate for the building. The existing thread mill 2 that we're proposing, it's already adequate for both potable water and fire suppression. And we have contacted the sewer department, and they have, I believe they provided us with a letter. I have to double check, but they provided us with a letter kind of indicating that the proposed use or the proposed units that we're including within this Thread Mill 2 is actually going to better stimulate their wastewater treatment facility, because there's certain loading associated with treatment systems, so the additional loading is actually going to benefit them. And as I mentioned, we are going to be implementing different stormwater techniques to minimize the amount of runoff going to the existing town stormwater system along River Road where it's currently going. So we're introducing subsurface infiltration chambers that will be managing the overall existing roof, and we're also going to be introducing the new green space to better utilize or better reduce the runoff associated with stormwater. Moving on to that, I did just want to speak to, we will be providing in our site plans the lighting, photometric plans, the soil erosion sediment control plans, like I mentioned, the stormwater management report to ensure the runoff reduction. That is going to all be provided, so I just want to put the public at ease to let them know that when we do go through master plan and site plan review, we will have a full set. I'm currently working on the full set as we speak. This is just a 50% design plan for the map amendment concept that we're discussing today. I did just want to speak to one other thing in terms of the building itself, and Jonathan could probably speak to this as well. The building was actually condemned when we first evaluated the project as a whole. So any sort of work that we're doing, that building would be sitting still right now, and there would be little to no remediation. It was essentially just fenced up, like I'm sure a lot of people know. So the work that we've been doing, or that Jonathan's been doing more specifically, has been to reduce the amount of potential contaminant migration for PCBs, asbestos, anything related to that, as well as removal of the roof. And to bring up another point, there actually was a roof collapse recently, right before we got involved back in the summer. So we're trying to prevent any sort of further measures of any sort of roof collapse or contaminant migration associated with the site. The one other note that I did want to bring up in terms of sidewalks, we're obviously here to work with the commission and the town of Stonington, but it is important to note that in terms of sidewalks, there's a feasibility issue, given that the marina that we're dealing with is right in the center of our property. So we do not have that access to put the sidewalks along that portion. And as I mentioned, along Pawcatuck Ave, we haven't looked into that fully, but we're also restricted with not only the width of the roadway itself, but also the grade change along that area. So there's a cost feasibility aspect to looking at the sidewalks. We will evaluate it. We're willing to work with the town, but I do just want to bring that up as well. That there's restrictions along River Road and Pawcatuck Road for sidewalks.
Since you mentioned the sidewalks again, is there any chance that it would be feasible to put the sidewalk along River Road wrapping around what would be the rear side of the Northwest Marina building, and would you consider doing that and allowing the public to access it?
There's two issues with that.
Okay.
One of which is that's actually an easement for the town of Stonington, that portion along the backside of the property. That's why we actually didn't put any parking there. Okay. That was originally our plan, to try to expand the number of spaces that we'd have.
I think the town would work with you on it.
Well, that's true. That's very true. But it's also, it's tough to obviously not see when it's on the screen, but that portion of I believe it's the elevator shaft, the existing elevator shaft, essentially almost abuts right there. So a portion of the elevator shaft essentially almost abuts the other property. So the access along this area might be relatively difficult. I don't know if we'd be able to have the 5 foot wide concrete sidewalk that you'd want there. It's something that we can further evaluate. We have not at this time, but it's something that we can look into. It's this portion of the site back here we don't have great pictures of it, but it's I believe it's the old utility area. So it's something that we're actually not planning on call it revitalizing. Yeah. So it's not going to be your most appeasing, aesthetically pleasing sidewalk along the back portion of the property, but it's something to look into. I don't deny that.
A complete path to keep going up the road would earn some brownie points at the very least.
Understood. Absolutely. That was it in the questions that I was able to write down.
The one issue that you mentioned, the WPCA issues, the sewer issues, you may be subject to a supplemental assessment because of change of use. You're going from essentially a mercantile or commercial use to a residential use. And you would think that that would be less intense, but in the WPCA formulas, it's the other way around. It's more intense, so you might be subject to a supplemental assessment.
Understood.
So even though the property was connected to sewers, it probably never paid an assessment, but would be grandfathered. If you continued the commercial use, it will be subject to a supplemental assessment.
Understood. And again, I'm sure our Joe, our MEP, can probably speak to that better because I know he's been looking into specific loading required for the building.
Sounds good.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone have any other questions on the board?
Just to reiterate, so there is no through street, coming through the parking lot. As I read your plan, you have an island, and it's not going to be easily.
That's our intent, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, you're gonna have access to the property from both sides.
Yeah.
But it's not a through street, no.
No, I wouldn't call it. And the marine activity is going on now, the storage or whatever?
There is current storage.
On your property?
Yes, there is current storage. Jonathan, can you speak to?
Is that
if
going to
that's gonna be-
continue, I guess, is the question.
Yes, I understand.
While you're up at the microphone and before he comes up, did you, and I don't want you to lose the place for that question, but have you done any traffic studies in this area?
There has not been a traffic study yet, no.
But you plan to do a traffic study associated with the master plan?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Now my attempt to answer some of the questions. First of all, I think everybody in the room recognizes the history of the building and the abuses that have taken place to the building and also to the town's enforcement. There is currently, as the planner's report notes, a $295,000 blight fine that has been in existence for years. There's currently a lawsuit by the town to assess the damages that they incurred securing the building. So I'm not surprised that someone had lights flashing into their house. I'm not surprised that someone was not being honored by a variance requiring a buffer. It was lawlessness. So when we got involved in the project, we took all of that on. And obviously we took on the mistrust of, the well-founded mistrust of the neighbors who, like the town, had been subject to this conduct. So I appreciate and I respect the fact that you are well warranted in your concerns and that, you know, we inherited the predecessor's use and abuse of the property. So with that said, let me try to address some of the questions that you raised. Particularly Mr. Dottie, you asked about the capacity on the site, and the engineer discussed with, explained, what his findings had been, again, preliminarily. I personally met with the director of the WPCA. I showed him the plan. I asked him if he felt there was capacity for this project, and he said yes. He explained to me that in Mystic, they're over capacity. In Stonington, pretty much the same, but Pawcatuck has, been underutilized, so that not only do they have the capacity to take on the effluent that would be produced by this project, but it actually would benefit the operation because the sewer treatment is designed to handle a certain level of effluent and they don't have that.
Just
Secondly,
to correct that, Mystic is not over capacity. It was at one time the subject of extreme infiltration issues when it rained, and we had some capacity issues, but those sources of infiltration have been discovered, removed, and Mystic is not over capacity. So that is not a correct statement. And we do have capacity in Pawcatuck. That is a correct statement.
okay. Secondly, I did speak to the engineering at the Westerly Water that provides water to that area. They have a 12-inch main that goes by the site, and they are going to, I believe it's on Mark Street, make an extension where they upgrade the pipe from 8 inches to 12 inches there, followed to address a development that's taking place up the street. Now, in each case, when we apply for this application, the WPCA would conduct a study. They would refer it out to an engineering firm to see that this project was feasible for them. The same thing will happen with the Westerly Water. They will conduct a water study. They will hire an outside engineering firm to determine what the impact of this project is to their water supply and their water distribution system. So at the present time, we're operating under the assumption that there is capacity, but that assumption will be decided by the WPCA and the Westerly Water based on the routine studies that they conduct when projects like this are presented to them. As far as the lighting, again, not accommodating the abuses of the past, but the first thing that we addressed when we got involved in the project was the security. I mean, people were coming in there and starting fires and vandalizing, and so we met with the fire marshal and asked him, what we could do to try to stem that. That's why we put in fencing, and that's why we put in cameras to try to deter that. As far as the placement of the lighting, I don't know if that was in existence prior to our involvement, or if in our attempt to secure the property, there was an installation of lights that, intruded into your house. But if that's the case, all you have to do is contact us and we will try to remedy the problem. Unlike our predecessors, we're not going to ignore the concerns of our neighbor. If, I represented neighbors of the Mystic Seaport when they had lighting that intruded into their house, and they put in lighting fixtures that would no longer allow that to be done. So I would encourage you, sir, to contact us, and someone will go out to the site and see what the problem is and make a good faith effort to remediate that one issue. As far as the use of the site as an MC80, that has historically been the use. That will no longer be the use once we complete this phase of the project and go on to a site plan review. We don't have the right to do any of this until the commission fully approves of the project. And again, if you talk to the building inspector, or if you talk to the zoning enforcement officer, they will tell you that, the enforcement of the regulations, or the ignoring or the defiance of the enforcement of the regulations has been an historic problem for over a decade. And so right now, prior to the commission's taking any action, it is an MC80 zone, and it does allow storage but that is going to change. We wouldn't be investing the time and money and remediation and restoration to preserve boat storage on the site, okay? I know it sounds trite, but I mean, you just have to give us an opportunity to fix what had for a very long time been ignored and create more and more problems. Mr. Tamsky, I hope that your question has been answered. I stated at the workshop that there would be a component of affordable housing, and we will file an affidavit on the land evidence records if that is what the chair and the commission deems appropriate and places a condition or just simply instructs us. As far as the 50-foot buffer that the lady spoke about, that was the product of a variance to use that property for that. My understanding as a lawyer is that a variance runs with the land. It's like a covenant, like an easement. But that variance of a 50-foot buffer is also tied to a use. That 50-foot buffer is for marine commercial use. So if there was no marine commercial use, that variance wouldn't be applicable to the use. So it wouldn't maintain that requirement. I can't speak for the previous abuses of the property owner not abiding by that variance, but I think over time, as this project goes on, that will not be an issue because that use won't be there. What will be a concern of yours, and we fully expect it, is whatever happens in this phase 2 will require a buffer, and you as adjoining neighbors will be able to come at the site plan design review and say, hey, we live next door and we want there to be a 50-foot buffer, or we want there to be significant plantings that will, protect the use and enjoyment of your property so you're not looking at stored boats or other things. And this commission will take that site plan design review and they will incorporate your concerns. They will say, this site plan lacks the input and the concerns of the neighbors. So if we're going to approve this site plan, we're going to take into account the neighbors' concerns, and we're going to make that a condition of any approval of the site plan. So what exists now will change. And I know it's hard to look at this plan and say it looks like a blank check, but it's simply an application for a check. The bank, if you will, still has, oh, I'm sorry, I should stand like this. I'm not looking at you. What I'm trying to say is that there are provisions and safeguards that this commission will. I'm sorry? I'm not opposed to this project. All right, I'm not saying. Okay, I'm not implying that you were.
I think you've made your point. I think you've made your point.
Okay.
Thank you. And we are going to look into that variance.
I want to clarify a couple things.
Right.
Firstly, Town of Stonington does not have use variances, so it wouldn't be tied to the use, it would be tied to the district. So the MC80 district would require a variance if there was an encroachment within that 50-foot required buffer, which is required per the ordinance. So a variance would be to allow somebody to encroach within that 50-foot
Right.
buffer, not to establish a 50-foot buffer, because that's the base requirement for the zone. So that would be the first item. Switching over and changing the district doesn't mean that variance goes away, because it does run with the land. So there could be encroachment within that 50-foot buffer per the variance. The applicant has the opportunity to reestablish a 50-foot buffer or buffer of its choosing at the time of receiving approval of a master plan, which is not under consideration tonight.
Correct.
Additionally, just to clarify again, all of the discussion elements related to the project site, related to lighting, related to sidewalks design, none of those are under discussion or review tonight. This is for the zone change. All of those elements will be re-reviewed in terms of a public hearing at a site plan public hearing, which this is not. So just a reminder, I know we're answering a lot of these questions, which is great, but these are not under the commission's purview for discussion or determination tonight. So there can't be any stipulations made related to them. There can't be any requirements related to having something in the land records related to this specific zone change. This would all come later.
And
Thank
then
you, Cliff.
my last, just to answer the lady that had concerns about the construction and the weather coming in and where the snow and the like would be draining, and if we have a hurricane or a blizzard, you know, we have what we have. We're going to take every precaution that we can. We've received a building permit from the town building department. They routinely review the site, and we'll try as best we can with our limited ability in the time frame that we've started the project to address that. And that's the best that I can do to address that. Sorry, Ben.
I do have one more question. Conceptually, on your landscape plan sheet L1, if you wouldn't mind referring to that, it looks like an easement could be made to the town for a future sidewalk north and south of the Norwest Marine Building, such that if that were in place at some point, maybe if you were to buy out the Norwest Marine Building, or the new owners were amicable enough to have an easement on their property for a sidewalk could be stretched on the west side of River Road, all the way across your property and their property. So I guess my question is, would you consider, I don't need an answer tonight because we're not supposed to be talking specifics, but please take into consideration an easement for sidewalks on your property on the west side of River Road.
Yeah, I think that, you know, that could certainly be a collaboration between the property owners, and Norwest Marina is going to come before you for something. At that time, you can ask them the very same question.
But please take it under consideration.
One last question for you while you're still up there. What is the name of the historical grant that you guys are taking advantage of, which requires the 20% affordable housing?
I believe it was a condition of the environmental assessment that was requested
The environmental assessment grant?
The environmental assessment grant, if I heard Mr. Coggins correctly, has a condition of approval that the site have affordable housing of 20%.
And you guys have just completed that application, and so you are now locked into that, regardless of what you would say to us.
I think that's an accurate statement.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Any other questions? Clifton, any other input at all as it relates to this zone change application? Anyone who spoke previously wish to speak again? Yes, sir.
I just have one last question about...
Would you speak into the microphone, please? Thank you.
Just one last question. The residences, are they going to be owner? Are they going to be condos, or are they going to be rental units?
I think they're rental units, aren't they? Rental units.
All of them. All of them? All of them. Thank you.
Anyone else? Say one last time. Anyone else desire to speak either for or against this application, or just make a general comment? Okay, I think the appropriate motion is in order.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to close the public hearing.
Thank you, Ben. There's a motion to close the public hearing. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion is seconded. Thank you, Andy. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Public hearing is closed. What's the commission's pleasure on this application?
Mr. Chairman, as I understand it, we have 4 decisions that we need to make on this, so I will
Correct.
propose them one at a time.
Yes.
So the first is a decision concerning the consistency with the Plan of Conservation and Development, POCD. I make a motion that this plan is consistent with our Plan of Conservation and Development.
There's a motion on the floor that the plan is consistent with the Plan of Conservation and Development. Is there a second?
I second it.
Seconded by Gary. Thank you, Gary. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I also make a motion concerning the zoning regulations. The motion is that this plan is consistent with our zoning regulation 7.19.
Thank you, Ryan. There's a motion that it is consistent with our zoning regulations, that this zone change is consistent with our zoning regulations. Is there a second?
I second it.
Seconded by Gary Belkey. Thank you, Gary. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve the zoning map amendment request as made by the applicant.
The motion on the floor to approve the application of Pawcatuck Riverview zone change amendment and coastal area management review.
I'll second.
Motion is made and seconded. Thank you, Andy. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries.
And Mr. Chairman, I think you included with the zoning map amendment also the coastal area management, correct? So that would cover the 4 that we needed to make in the decision.
Sorry, I might have mentioned that earlier. Thank you. There's a motion on the floor to approve the coastal area management review application. Thank you, Ryan. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Andy. Thank you, Andy. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Congratulations.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to adjourn the hearing.
Motion is made to adjourn the hearings. Is there a second? Any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion is adjourned.